Hey guys, so we're gonna finish up our discussion on consciousness, talking about psychoactive drugs and their effects on consciousness. Um, and drugs are divided into different classifications depending on the effect that they have on the body. Um, so you have stimulants, the drugs that stimulate, that arouse the central nervous system and activity. Um, is our first category we're going to look at. Okay, so some examples, both the illegal meth and cocaine, um, and the legal variety, caffeine, nicotine if you're a certain age, and then Ritalin if you have a prescription for it. Um, but all of those have the effect of stimulating central nervous system activity, can cause a rush of energy followed by a crash once the effects of that narcotic wears off. Um, a prolonged exposure can lead to a whole host of different physiological problems, and we'll see a chart in just a second that kind of goes into more detail about some of the problems. But psychosis is one that can be a result from prolonged use of the stimulant classification of drugs. And then you have the opposite end of the spectrum where you have depressants, which decrease the activity of the central nervous system. All right, and again, you have kind of and it depends on if you have like the correct prescription, but anti-anxiety, alcohol, barbiturates can be prescribed as kind of a mild tranquilizer as well. Um, so these medications again decrease it. Alcohol in particular is probably the most common depressant that people kind of come into contact in the day-to-day life. Um, and alcohol is the center of a lot of attention and the effects that it can have on people, lowering the inhibition, um, with males being more likely to engage in negative behaviors as a result of alcohol abuse. Opiates, which actually aren't in the news as much with the virus and um, the results of that going on. But there was the opioid crisis that these painkillers were just being kind of given out, not heroin obviously, but oxycodone and codeine and stuff, um, much more freely than they probably should have been, and just like we looked at with the sleep medication and stuff, um, how the body can you take it and then it works, but as your body kind of gets used to the medication and it builds up a tolerance, now the dosage that you used to take that was effective no longer, so you have to take more and you have to take more, and eventually your body becomes addicted to it and hooked, um, and can go lead to a whole even without the possibility of overdose, um, can lead to several slight physiological problems. Okay, so it kills pain as its primary purpose, at least the prescription and painkillers and opiates that are given out, by physicians. Um, but it can sedate people, cause them to be apathetic, um, and lead to other problems as well. Okay, and then other classifications that don't fit into one of those first couple, hallucinogens that basically create this change in perception to as the name suggests, cause people to hallucinate, LSD, PCP. Marijuana, which is usually classified into a hallucinogen, but um, isn't as we'll see right now, isn't as kind of neatly uh, categorized as some of the other drugs are. Inhalants, it's why spray paint like is locked up and stuff because of the chemicals as the of causing the paint spray to go out can be inhaled and have a hallucinogenic effect. Um, so yeah, that used to be especially like among teens they call it huffing of inhaling that inhalant and having the um, hallucinogenic reaction to it. So um, marijuana is kind of worth focusing on a little bit. It is Currently, uh, not legal as far as the federal government is concerned, um, but it is something that is definitely trending to becoming legalized. It's medically legal in I don't know, I would say most states. I really don't know 100% for sure. Definitely in Arizona, but a lot of other places. And then flat out just legal, period, and increasingly more and more states. Not Arizona yet, but the trend again seems to be moving toward full on state acceptance, and then most likely just a federal law deeming it illegal. So it's something that used to be, as demonized as like, heroin and cocaine and stuff that is increasingly trending toward I'm sure it'll definitely be controlled substance like tobacco and alcohol are. Need to be a certain age, probably 21, I would assume, to use it, but it is increasingly more accepted. Um, and it doesn't fit in nicely in any category. The active drug is THC. There's also CBD, which is, I just read an article actually. There's been a huge explosion in people using CBD as a relaxant painkiller and stuff during this time of crisis, during the epidemic where people's stress levels are really high. You don't want to necessarily go to the doctor to maybe even try to get a prescription if you don't have one before, or maybe you don't want to kind of go through that process. But CBD is available at stores all over the place, and has the relaxing qualities. So marijuana is kind of unique in that it's trending towards social acceptance, and the plant, is just like they we have genetic selection and stuff, and we can go bigger crops and more effective and whatever, and selective breeding. Modern day marijuana strains are much, much, much more potent than previous generations of it because it's being grown as specific species to be more effective. Okay, so here's just kind of a classification of drugs. You have your depressants, which reduce central nervous system activity, and you have your stimulants, which excite central nervous system activity, and some of the effects, obviously with the extreme on both end being death, and some common different drug groups, your amphetamines, antidepressants, cocaine, your marijuana here. So you can see what are kind of more extreme. Your anesthesia, if you'd go in for a surgery or something and they would put you completely unconscious. It's a dangerous thing, and that's why anesthesiologists get paid a lot of money, and it's like a lot of responsibility, because if you don't get that medication right, either they wake up halfway through surgery or you give them too much and they die on the operating table. So you need to be like very precise with exactly how much, because it's really dangerous, serious stuff, full-on anesthesia. So the different classifications, obviously the different effects they can have on consciousness and stuff. Just some information on drug use. Um, both legal with a prescription and illegal narcotics or whatever. Even like the recreational stuff like tobacco or alcohol especially isn't really considered to be it's definitely a more mild thing. You have beer commercials during TV and during the Super Bowl, and everyone loves it and whatever. But the difficulty with all drugs is the tolerance that you build up. That if you abuse this, the amount that used to produce the desired effects, whatever they were, whatever narcotic you're using, now because you built up a tolerance, now no longer is enough, and you continually have to up your dosage if you're abusing it. If you're using it correctly and wisely, that doesn't have to become an issue. But people who especially abuse that narcotic build up this tolerance and need to use it more and more and more. And there can be really terrible physiological, psychological damage that results from that. Okay, and then if that person then kind of realizes, hey, I need to stop maybe abusing alcohol, or I need to stop using, illegal narcotics and whatever, and they tried, like, hey, this is really hurting me, and they try to get away from it, then the body goes through a withdrawal where the removal of that drug from the system, the body now isn't able to produce, the required, neurotransmitter in some cases. If you used to, your body used to, be able to produce dopamine and that pleasurable effect. Now you used to have that narcotic, which replaced your body's own production of dopamine. So now you take away the narcotic, which was your sole source of dopamine, and your body isn't naturally producing it like it was anymore, and it goes to that withdrawal. So, obviously drug abuse, both legal, because again, with the opioid epidemic, people were legally being prescribed drugs, and they're like, hey, I'm getting it from my doctor, and it's, not something I need to necessarily worry about, but they were, abusing it, probably not even on purpose, but they're just like, oh, I'm really in pain, I need to take more. And then they got the tolerance, and then they're like, oh my gosh, this is hurting me, and I try to stop, but now I'm in so much pain, and they're in kind of a lose-lose situation. So something to be very, very cautious about. And there's a lot of different factors that affect the effects of the drug, different people with different genetics, the height, weight, of again, using alcohol is kind of a more common seen example of this. Some people can drink a large amount and it not really having that much effect on them, and some people, they have one glass of wine and they're already a little tipsy. So depending on their size, any other drugs in their system that could be interacting with this, maybe they're on antidepressants and they take something they're not supposed to, and now there's a huge, issue there. Also to be aware of, and if you're ever in that situation, you kind of just know what different effects what different things that could be true about you that might affect what influence that drug is going to have on your system. Okay, so again, make sure you know the different classifications of the narcotics, what sort of narcotics fit into each category, and what effects they might have on the body.